Is there a limit to how many key squares one can control? Have you ever wondered how many key squares you can control in chess? This question is essential, especially when considering pawn endgames. Key squares are specific squares that, when controlled by your king, can lead to winning or drawing positions. Let's break this down. In chess, the number of key squares depends on the rank of the pawn. For pawns that are not rook pawns, when a pawn is on its second, third, or fourth rank, there are typically 3 key squares. These squares include the square 2 ranks ahead of the pawn and the squares immediately to the left and right of that square. As the pawn advances to the 5th or 6th rank, the number of key squares increases to 6. This includes the squares directly in front of the pawn and those to the left and right on both the rank immediately ahead and the rank 2 squares ahead. If the pawn reaches the 7th rank, the key squares are the squares adjacent to the pawn on the 7th and 8th ranks. So, as you can see, the number of key squares changes as the pawn moves forward. However, it remains a limited set of squares tied directly to the pawn's position. Now, is there a limit to how many key squares one can control? Yes, there is a practical limit. The number of key squares for any single pawn is usually no more than 6. This limitation is because key squares are defined relative to the pawn's location. While you can control multiple key squares around one pawn, controlling key squares for multiple pawns at the same time is more complex. It depends on the position and the activity of the pieces on the board. The king's ability to occupy or control these squares is essential in endgames. The opposition and precise king maneuvers are often used to gain access to or deny the opponent access to these key squares. This directly influences the outcome of the game. In advanced chess strategy, controlling key squares plays a significant role in prophylaxis. This means anticipating and preventing your opponent's plans. By occupying or controlling these squares, you limit your opponent's king and pawn mobility. This restriction increases your chances of promoting your pawns or defending against your opponent's threats. In summary, key squares are specific, limited sets of squares tied to the position of pawns. The number of key squares for a single pawn is limited, generally between 3 and 6, depending on the pawn's rank. It is not possible to control an unlimited number of key squares because they are defined by the pawn's position. Controlling key squares is a strategic tool to restrict the opponent's king and promote pawns, which is central to advanced chess concepts.